Hi, what are you doing?
Okay, thank you, Evan. Thank you, Takeda and Leonard. It's fantastic with the discussion we're going to start. Please introduce yourself, what you do, and also maybe related to the project. And obviously, Evan already explained himself. So, Takeda and Leonard, please explain yourself.
Okay, introduce myself. I'm a crypto journalist, especially DeFi space. I'm researching the cryptocurrency for 3 years, and I want to get a journalist in this space. That's why I am a journalist for cryptocurrency. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leona. I'm a security engineer. I do job about the security in crypto exchanges, and I have a productizer which use NFT as a membership card to real side adoption. I'm a big fan of Professor Simon, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I call you Amy or Kim?
So yeah, I go by Gun. So people who know me, so I use my middle name.
Okay.
And people who don't know me, they call me Emin. So if I receive messages that say Dear Emin, then I hope you can read them as carefully. So all of you I would like to get messages from, and you should say Dear Gun or whatever. Just say Gun. Gun is fine. Then I'll be very happy to share it.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's start the discussion from the first question because most I know, of course, most people want to interested in your personality and average. So that's why first question, what is user simply questions? What is the torrent and the east western in the New York? What is the torrent in the DeFi space or cryptocurrency space in the New York?
What is going on in New York City in the blockchain space? So there's a lot happening in New York. So let's see. So AVA Labs is based in New York City. I recently moved to Williamsburg, New York, to start a new headquarters there. And I've spent a lot of time talking to Wall Street people, and they are in a very funny position. Many of them do not think very highly of crypto. On the other hand, they can see that there is a nugget of something that is really, really interesting. So they can see that there is something technologically there, but everybody who has actually explored the area then tells me, but, something. And then something changes, but it's too slow. But it's, the exchanges are too manipulating. But it's not really appropriate for issuing assets on top. And so there are a bunch of buts. I think you heard me talk about how we designed the platform so we can actually allow them to issue new assets on top. And this is crucial. Otherwise, every big company in New York or anywhere else is experimenting with blockchains. So we are 10 years in. It's been a long time. Every Fortune 500 company has done at least one blockchain trial. Absolutely every single one. It could be a makeup company. I assure you they play with blockchains. It could be dog food, and I'm sure they looked into blockchains for dog food. It has happened. Not a single one of those projects has gone into a mission-critical setting. Nobody deploys this crap. It just isn't deployed at all. And the reason for it is there is such a big mismatch between their needs and what these platforms provide. Those of you who were around in the 70s or 80s, the early 80s, I remember the early 80s, we used to have to manufacture our computers out of parts. The parts would come to us from China, and we would have to connect them together to build the PCs. That's essentially the era we live in right now. So somebody will come in and they'll be the Steve Jobs of this universe. They'll be like, here is my construction kit, here's my ready-made device, here is my PC, or here is my Mac, or whatever else. That era has not yet arrived. So it's a fun time, it's very promising, and it's time to sort of bootstrap out of this mess and leave all the crappy crypto things behind and deliver products that the masses can use that address their needs.
expected New Yorkers always talking about the regulation.
Oh, regulation.
Yeah.
No, that's not New York specific so much. The regulators, they're at the federal level in the U.S., and they play a big role in all of our lives. But I would say that American regulators have been particularly good in keeping their hands off of new technology. And there are all sorts of geopolitical plays going on at that level. They're concerned that this is an emerging area that America must have a say in, and they don't want China to have dominance in the blockchain space. That's really, in the current climate, that's what's happening in the US, at least from my vantage point. It's important for every country, every sovereign nation to understand that this thing is not necessarily a threat to their sovereignty, but not partaking in it is going to leave them behind. So, any country that really doesn't have a blockchain strategy is going to have to pick it up from a country that does. That's not a good situation to be in. So Japan is very, very advanced in this area. It's got good regulation, clear regulatory guidelines, although it's a little hard to break in. It's actually very, very well done. And the U.S. is not so bad either. It's not a tight regulatory. The regulators have exercised a lighter touch.
So you mentioned that Japan has a good regulation country. By the way, how much Japanese regulation? As a developer.
Developers always complain about the regulation because we come up new things, but it will be banned or will just uncertainty was bound and Geek is a little bit nervous, so we tend to avoid risks, and so that's why blockchain game and NFT is common usage in Japan because there's no risk about it's few risk about low regulation. The regulator is always saying, NFT, it's okay, you can do anything about them, and because they are really busy about the regulator, cryptocurrency, not NFT. So that's the situation of Japan currently.
Oh, nice. As you mentioned about regulation, the country differ in regulation. Americans have a regulation, Japan have a regulation. However, the blockchain space have a new regulation type, I think. What will you evaluate the blockchain as a blockchain engineer or blockchain project?
So that's an interesting question. So every country has its own regulatory frameworks.
Yes.
And blockchains are not well suited for any of them. They're extra legal. They're on the side of everything. That's why they're so hard to interface with existing institutions. That's why they've had so much difficulty. So what I see happening is that we need new laws to address the issuance of certain kinds of tokens. I think every regulator is beginning to see this, although it's actually very hard to write what that regulation ought to look like. They are looking for more sample use cases that they can draw from. So we're going to see inevitably new laws that address this. And I can't wait for that. We need clear guidelines as developers, as Leona has mentioned. So, so that's one. Two, at the same time, we also need blockchains that adapt to the current reality. The current reality isn't going to change at least for another 5 years, in my opinion, maybe more. So then we have at least half a decade, maybe a full decade for change to come. In that time frame, we need blockchains that can support compliant use cases. If you wanted to issue compliant assets, it's actually very hard to know what to do. And it's technologically difficult because it's impossible to keep people in it. So I think the approach we took in AVA with subnets that I described earlier is an attempt at actually doing exactly that. And I think it captures exactly the essence of what needs to be done, which is allow local enforcement to be done, allow local subnets to be performed, but also allow global subnets not subject to any specific compliance regime.
Oh, I think we want to change the question about maybe a question about Ethereum. We mentioned about
Yeah. I thought that Professor Nizera became famous after the DAO hub, because you mentioned to the DAO about the code's role or code's no role. And, while you had many invention before Ethereum, like that you invented Bitcoin energy and many things, but Professor became famous about that in Japan. What kind of future of Ethereum interested?
What kind of future in Ethereum interests me? Just about everything. So one of the most amazing things about the Ethereum community is how vibrant it is. So the main thing I love about DevCon is the energy in the room. So if you ask me, like, well, what is it? It's real. I don't really care what the talks are. They're fine. They're great. DeFi, very exciting area. But you could strip all that away, and I would still come here just to hang out with you all. It's fantastic. I hope you all feel the same way. And I hope we can create a similar community around AVA. So that energy, that can-do attitude, that desire to reshape finance, any shape or form, in fact, not just finance, the way we build systems, it's just amazing. So that really motivates me. There are a bunch of other shared values that I think are important, and I feel like I should spell them out. In Bitcoin circles, which is where I was at before, the typical thing was take down the state. The state is the enemy. I don't think the state is the enemy. I don't think there is a single enemy. Anybody who's in a position of power becomes enemy over time, even if they start out good. Corporations are one of the biggest enemies of normal people. They harvest our data and sell it to people. Byzantine fault tolerance technologies are a great way to get rid of these power hubs, to get rid of these intermediaries who otherwise collect rent, charge you, mistreat your data, turn us into products. So that is one of the things that gets me going. Any topic on any discussion on those topics, I find really fascinating. Whether it's identity on Ethereum, or it's how to build Web3 on Ethereum. All of those are really interesting. And one thing I did not mention that I'll go into more detail on Friday is that AVA fully supports the EVM. So you could issue smart contracts directly on AVA. Everything you could do with Ethereum, you could actually do on AVA itself much faster. And with all of these additional features that I mentioned. So that's a good place to be in. And but again, as I said, strip it all out, no content whatsoever. I'd still just hang out here for the people.
You mentioned that you mentioned about code. I think I want to ask you what is code, because the most famous analogy, such as Brad, he says code is law. However, you mentioned that code is not law.
Code is not law.
Yeah. So however, I thought code is important for us to be more next society, because code create a consensus algorithm and smart and the algorithm basis on smart contract.
What do you think code is?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. So we're here post the DAO hack. And when the DAO hack was happening, I was one of the people who said, look, we can undo this particular hack. And I can go into more detail about how that came about if you guys are interested. But the code is not law. Law is law. Okay, that's very clear. This does not take that much effort to figure out. And code is code. And in fact, code is often buggy. This is a fact of life. Every single one of you who's ever written a line of code has also probably written, for every 10 lines of code, you probably wrote a line of bug, right? It's just, that's what I do. That's, I think, probably the industry language. So we should expect the systems we build to fail. They will fail. These systems are not, unlike what the Bitcoin people try to push down your throat, we are not slaves to algorithms. Just because it's written in the code that way by this anonymous guy 10 years ago, doesn't mean we're subject to it for life. So these systems have to be human-serving. And if they're not serving their community, then they can be changed. Because at the end of the day, a system that doesn't serve its community is a failed system, and you can easily shift to a non-failed one. So that's my take on this. It's very straightforward, and it took a lot of effort when the DAO hack was happening. The Bitcoiners were saying, no, you must always follow the longest chain. That's nonsensical. So you have to follow the longest valid chain according to your own rules. You determine what's valid. If you don't like it, you know you can change it. So now, of course, the opposite of this, where everything is discretionary, where nothing is final, where nothing is immutable, is also a terrible world. So we have to have some social convention on what is changeable and what is not. But we should never, never, ever fool ourselves that this is anything more than a social convention. Bitcoin holds together solely because of a social convention. It's not like, they have to follow the longest chain. It's, in fact, they made a whole bunch of changes to their own validity rules recently. So it's not the, as I mentioned, it's not the longest chain that rules over our lives. It's what serves us. And I'd love to build systems that provide strong immutability because it's in our best interest to do so. Strong security because it's in our best interest to do so. Systems without any methods of undo, that's exactly what we're doing with AVA. But if there are bugs and flaws, then we should be able to address those as we did with the DAO.
Yeah, this problem reminds us Japanese about the name hack. On 2018, $6 million was stolen by hackers to their wallets, and name did not hard fork. While Ethereum did hard fork, and I think NEM should hard fork because they could choose hard fork or not. And it's already centralized to a certain extent because they could choose whether or not to hard fork. And simultaneously, at the same time, I think every single virtual currency, crypto entity is centralized, including Bitcoin and Ethereum, because few coders can update. Few coders are capable to update their code with wisdom and right decision. And then, what do you think? Do you think all blockchain should commit hard fork when such incident, just like Ethereum did in the DAO hard fork?
Okay, so that's a great question. And let me be very clear. I would not have hard forked after the NEM hack. I never ever would. And I was a big proponent of hard forking after the DAO hack. And let me tell you why. And I couldn't tell people why at the time it was happening. So what happened with the DAO fork was that the DAO had a bug in it. That's all true. But the DAO was code, and that DAO is user code, it's not system code. Now, we all agree that if the system had a bug in it, then it's fair game to change and hard fork. After all, there's some unintended effect. So Bitcoin, for example, had 4 billion Bitcoin generated. Everybody knows that that's not part of the social contract. You can't have 4 billion Bitcoins. That happened because of a bug in the system, and it was quickly undone. So that is not considered a sort of a blight on Bitcoin's history, because there was a bug in the system and it had to be undone. In fact, there were many bugs in Bitcoin's history, and the system was undone. More than just that event, there was also the database problem as well, and there are others. So if the bug is in the system, we all agree that that's okay to undo. Now, a bug in the DAO, which I was a proponent of hard forking. Why was I a big proponent? Because we have to think about where that bug came from. That code was scrutinized by every single Ethereum developer I know. So everyone had looked through it. Somehow everybody missed it. So somehow a very critical fact about how to program on top of the EVM was not communicated to the user community. In fact, the developers themselves had forgotten about reentrance. So the problem actually stemmed from the system. The people behind the system did not communicate properly to the people who were implementing the applications. So I did not want to say this explicitly at the time because it would be like pointing a finger at the guilty party. And it also wasn't clear legally who would sue whom and whether or not anybody would have criminal liability. So I didn't want to point a finger at Vitalik, whom I like very much and we have a great relationship, and say, well, you guys kind of screwed up. But I think everybody who was involved realized that indeed it was really the system that let down the application programmers. So that's why I saw the failure as a system failure and not as a user failure. The bug is there, sure, but it happened because of a failure to communicate. Documentation is part of a system. If it's misdocumented and somebody screws up, it's not necessarily their fault. They did what you told them to do, and they did. If you don't tell them to avoid certain things, they will do those things. You should have told them not to do that particular pattern. So that's what I think. I think the DAO fork was okay once. I don't think Ethereum should be in the business of doing too many forks. That takes away from the overall value proposition. And certainly AVA, if we fail to communicate, it's a system failure. It's on me and everybody else that's involved in the system, and that should be undone, and nobody else should be held liable for it. But if it's the other way around, there's a buggy application, then it's just a buggy application. You can't be in the business of correcting for bugs here and there, and you certainly don't want to be in the business of adjudicating, deciding on who's right and who's wrong as a system implementer. So that's my nuanced opinion on this. I'm glad that enough time has passed that we can talk freely, and until recently I was keeping my mouth shut about this.
You have a question? Do you have a question about that?
Yeah, a binary implication. Maybe you basically suppose on-chain governance, I think. And, because on-chain governance, if one application or one user have failed, but it's, they can fix or debug their area or some limitation. And is that correct?
So the question is with on-chain governance?
Yeah, on-chain governance. Yeah, for example, the Tezos and the EOS and such BFT consensus tend to adopt everything is on contract or
right.
Yeah, everything is on chain and do both and update.
Right.
And especially some EOS or IOST such token is native. There's no native tokens. Native tokens is just a contract on chain. What do you think about this?
So yeah, that's a good question. So Tezos, I was an advisor. I don't think I'm technically anymore an advisor to Tezos. I was an advisor to Tezos. It's a project I know well and I happen to like very much. They have this on-chain governance mechanism that allows them to change the hash of their code. So if enough people decide to change the semantics of the system will just shift to the newly voted new semantics, new way of operating. I find that a little too general. We do not support that, and it's on purpose. In AVA, you cannot do it, and it's by design. So you cannot suddenly change what the system is from what it is today to something drastically different. These systems have to be predictable, and they have to obey certain guidelines that everyone can see and figure out. If the crowd suddenly decides, oh, we're going to change everything, then using the chain itself for that kind of vote, I find strange. I think monetary systems have to be predictable. Somebody should be able to say, well, this is going to be the state of your wallet when you come back from vacation, and you should be able to go away to climb a mountain, if you will, and come back in a few months, a few weeks, few months time, and find a mostly predictable system. These big changes I find disruptive or potentially disruptive. And I also worry about things that, like hacks and so forth, that can cause them to wildly veer out of the normal range. So we do not support this. We have a much more limited range of on-chain governance with all these limiters in place that I mentioned.
Thank you. Yeah. How about Avalanche? Because Avalanche is a hybrid blockchain protocol. As you mentioned about Avalanche is platform of platform. So what did you combine from another philosophy or technology? Please tell me about that.
Sure. So Avalanche ends up combining the best of permission networks with the best of permissionless. You can create a sub-network that's kind of like a permission network. You decide who's in it. You can make it open subnet if you want. Anybody can be in your subnet. You give everybody a purple certificate, and now you have as many purple nodes as there are volunteers. Or you can make it closed. I can just say, you three are my purple nodes and nobody else. So that gives great flexibility to the system. All of those proofs of concept that didn't work, that were too isolated, that didn't go anywhere, well, now you can have permission deployments on top of a permissionless foundation. You can create a subnetwork that accomplishes something that's relevant to you. Those assets that the subnet implements are freely tradable with everybody else in the network, with all other assets. So it's a nice hybrid, and there's a nice slider between all the way between entirely permissionless to entirely permissioned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, we know about the Avalanche technically. Here goes professor give us a presentation, and then the proposer. I want to ask about the proposer of Avalanche. It's an anonymous team rocket.
No, Team Rocket.
Team rocket, and it's obviously the enemy of Satoshi in Pokemon. And do you find any shadow of Satoshi, or you are? Well, I cannot determine you are the one of the rocket team or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, could you kindly tell me? There's any shadow of Satoshi?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
So, Team Rocket is Team Rocket. It is Satoshi's biggest enemy in Pokemon, as you know. And Satoshi, by now, Satoshi was an amazing person, right? He had a great vision and had great timing, and ended up showing the world what is possible with cryptocurrencies. I know how I felt when I read the paper. It was fantastic. And but by now, his technical invention has stalled, if you will. It hasn't changed much, and it isn't really capable of living up to his vision. So he's been outdone on just about every front I can imagine that I can at least turn into a metric. He's been outdone on finality, on throughput, on scale, on number of participants, and obviously on decentralization. So by now he's a historical figure, and there's a new game in town. Team Rocket? Who they are, I do not know.
Yeah. It seems that everyone is not so satisfied about that. Do you know Rocket Team ever?
Yeah.
So, no, and if I wouldn't tell you, I think if you think about every great culture, it has an origin story. So, there's the Japanese origin story, of course. I know the Turkish one, being led out of Central Asia behind the wolf. Every American Indian tribe has their own one. And you can probe at them. Were the Turks really led out of Central Asia behind the wolf? Did the wolf Asena really lead us to it? I don't know. Probably not. And probably there was a dog or whatever. And if I discover that, then maybe it was a scrawny dog and not like the ones that I think of in my imagination. What do I gain by doing that? I think some myths are better left alone. Who Satoshi is something that I left alone. I think we are all better off not knowing. And in the same fashion, Team Rocket did their part. They gave us something that's anonymous without any ego involved, so that there is nobody in charge of this avalanche idea. And I think that's the greatest gift anybody can say. That here is something, it is not necessarily my thing. And so we should take it and not ask that many questions about, oh, where did this really come from? Even though it's kind of human nature to ask, it's better to just take the gift.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and recently many anonymous proposals. Yeah, there are many anonymous proposals avalanche and maybe Mibble. I think the anonymous proposal should be anonymous as far as possible because if Satoshi is not anonymous, maybe Bitcoin might be attacked by
Satoshi himself. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So if Satoshi wasn't anonymous, then he'd be in a position of control, at least social control. And that's not a good thing to have. And so I think it's wonderful to have a protocol where there is no single person in charge. And that's the way it should be. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
That's the overall.
So maybe they're asking the 1 or 2 questions from audiences.
Okay. Questions from the
Good
audience?
question.
Any questions or wants to
Yes.
discuss?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how to promote distribution of AVA tokens? I mean, I'm not in how it's going to proceed in the sense that not talking about token sales at all, but how people will engage with the protocol by, I don't know if it's going to be a delegation process, if there are going to be validation.
Great question. This is what I think about day and night. So let me try to give you some sort of outlines of what I am thinking of. This is by no means definitive and it's subject to change, but here are some principles. We want as many coins in as many hands as possible. This is the world's most decentralized protocol. And on day one, I want there to be many stakeholders helping the network, securing the network. That's the point I want to get to. Anything else where the coins are concentrated in small number of hands is a failure. So and I want to avoid failure on day one. So that's as important and beyond it was essential to me. We want to make sure that the coins go into the hands of people who know how to use them. So we will certainly be doing strategic airdrops to people who we believe would be valuable, would actually, not valuable necessarily, but would be able to know what to do with them. Developers that we can identify, participants that we can identify, who seem gung-ho about the system would be great to have. We have a certain transaction type called use it or lose it. So we will give coins using the use it or lose it transactions. So that if a person is unable to pick the coins up, they will get taken back and they can be used by somebody else who's more worthy. At the time Bitcoin started, there was no way of distributing coins, and this mining thing was essentially a lottery, and it randomizes who gets it in their hands. You can't do that these days with proof of work, because proof of work is overly centralized. If I use proof of work, it would go to the 30 or so the GPU pools out there that already exist. It would end up in the hands of 30 to 40 people, and frankly, they don't bring all that much value to anybody. So we're not going to be employing proof of work in any shape or form during the distribution process. The other thing, of course, so a very simple way to distribute the coins is to sell some of them. And if we do that to the public, we're going to make sure that the public gets terms commensurate with, similar to, the terms that all of the early venture capitalists have. So essentially I want to make sure that the regular people like me, that I would have been in the audience of, they get all of the same terms that the VCs ended up getting. So I don't want this to turn into a venture capital coin. We've had enough of those, and all of the carefully constructed coin dynamics go to hell when a lot of coins go into VC hands and then they suddenly get dumped on retail. last thing I want to do is allow the VCs to dump on my retail. So I'll do whatever it takes to protect the retail from that.
Thank you.
Yeah. You mentioned that try to make the avalanche as egalitarian as possible, right? So besides the distribution, what distribution of tokens to the participants? How about in terms of the voting power? But I understand your consensus is a little bit different from a typical POS, the classical protocol. So let's say if somehow a validator can have 10 times stake versus a validator who have 1 time stake, during the consensus subsampling process, does the validator who have 10 times stakes have more voting power? Does it have more influence in the consensus process?
So that's a good question, and I think I was the very first person to actually suggest the following idea, which is exactly the same question you're asking. We could easily weight votes by something other than by a function of how many coins that the stakers have, where the function is something other than the identity function, right? So if I hold 10 coins and you hold 10 million coins, should you have 1 million times my voice? After all, I'm one person and you're also one person. So there are two competing interests here, and I will lay it out and leave it at that. If we try to have one person, one vote, it doesn't work. The system becomes amenable to attacks, because you will take your 10 million, divide it into 10 million small holdings, and end up getting the same amount of voice as before. In general, there's an impossibility result, and very well known by John Dussert, that says that no matter what resource you use, people who have more of that resource will end up having more say. So we're building a monetary system. People with more money will always end up having some more say than others. But we can use a combination of tricks. And one of the tricks is getting people to voluntarily admit that they are one person, and then coming up with a weighting scheme that is a hybrid between, or somewhere in the middle of, you have as many votes as you have money, versus you have one vote because you're one person. So there's a big universe out there between the two, and so we're exploring exactly where it makes sense to be on that curve. If you go too far to the left, you're open to attack. If you go too far to the right, then you have these problems of people with more money having more say in the system. So perhaps there's a intermediate point that we could explore. We are the first people to actually mention this, and the very first ones that might actually do something like this.
So will you have more details of this in your coin dynamics paper?
No, we do not. We discussed this in the, we discussed this in the coin dynamics paper. So we have a coin dynamics paper that isn't public yet. So, but this topic is discussed.
I heard that Avalanche adoption to BCH is not, Bitcoin Cash is not so far. What kind of feature of Avalanche is suitable for Bitcoin Cash?
Oh, that's a great question. So thank you. So that's a great question. The Bitcoin Cash folks have a bit of a problem on their hands, because their hash rate is small, and so miners can come into their coin and just attack them. And we lived through a hash war with BSV. So BSV miners could have attacked BCH. BTC miners could have come into attack. So they need a way to protect their chain. And there are two different ways Avalanche can be used there. Avalanche can be used to quickly finalize their transactions before they're committed to blocks. That's one way of doing it. Or Avalanche can be used their old blocks so that their chain cannot be reorganized. So one of them we call pre-consensus, the latter one we call post-consensus. Both are possible, and both involve combining Avalanche with proof of work. And it's interesting. So yeah, those are interesting directions to explore.
Thank you.
Can I have one more question?
Quick question.
This one is I feel it's a pressing question.
Yeah.
So, your protocol has ever written a blog before to actually kind of like stress test the avalanche, the consensus.
I know it well.
I know, and then they have assertion that it's possible for you to store the network where the red and blue one doesn't overtake the others. And it's possible to achieve that with, I think, a certain percentage of malicious validator. I think less than 20%.
I know what to do.
I think I haven't seen a robust reply from Avalanche on that assertion yet.
That's right. We didn't rebut them because what they were doing was so bad that we thought that giving them additional attention would not be good. So what happened with the Near Protocol guys is that, so this has happened to me multiple times in my career. When people see you as an authority figure, when you're a professor, it makes sense for them to come and attack you just to raise their social profile.
But is there any possibility that
I'll tell you, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So many times in my life, I've seen people get into Twitter fights with me just to sort of be in the news or just to be seen. So the Near Protocol guys ended up trying to re-implement the Avalanche protocol. In the process, Kevin Seknicki, who was a chief protocol architect at AVA Labs, pointed out a typo in the original Team Rocket paper and said this is a typo. And so the Near Protocol guys then implemented it as they saw it with the typo and then drew those conclusions. All of those conclusions are wrong. So everything they say about the liveness problem is incorrect. And this has been pointed out to them. They found it because we pointed it out to them. And after they made a big deal of it, we also told them that they're making a big deal out of something that we taught them, and that it's highly unethical to do so. So I know they're still going around saying stuff about us. I think this is part of their strategy. I'm sorry to see it. I think I would like to think that they have additional things to bring to the table than this kind of attention-grabbing tricks. And so they're categorically wrong on the liveness of Avalanche. They're categorically wrong on what we're implementing. They're categorically wrong, and they're not doing what any professional would do, which is look beyond the typo that has been pointed out to them. It's like, we pointed it out to them. They didn't even find it themselves. It's that bad. I hope that helps. I'm really sad to see it. I'm glad you asked this. I sometimes get this question. But let's not end on this note. This is too negative. I would like to think that they can be made into more contributing members of society. They do a very nice video series. I've enjoyed them. They don't have to pick a fight with us to be known. I think if they keep doing what they do, they'll be known for their own positive contributions.
Thank you.
Any questions? Let's get a positive question. Who's here excited? Who's here building assets? Let me know the audience a little bit. Who's here who has ever issued an ERC-20? Anyone at all? Who here? Oh, excellent. Who here holds ERC-20s? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so those are so if you're in that business of who here trades ERC-20s? Great. So so AVA is a fantastic platform for doing these things. Who here is excited about DeFi? DeFi,
Yeah.
decentralized finance. Who here is excited about non-DeFi uses of blockchains, like identity, Web3,
Yeah.
etc.? Okay, it's a fantastic crowd. I knew it was a fantastic crowd. Great.
Yeah, you have an announcement in Demcom.
I have an announcement
Yeah.
on Friday. I have a very
Yes,
cool demo
okay.
to show you on Friday.
Nice.
Come check it out. It's going to be exciting. I hope it works on
Yeah.
the day. I'm hoping to do a live demo, and you know how those go. You'll at least see me make a fool out of myself if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's always funny. Then you can make fun of me. But if it does work, it should be very, very cool.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.